The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue across the living room as I moved around the kitchen, putting the final touches on Carlos's birthday dinner. The rich aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of the chocolate cake I had baked just for him. I smiled to myself, recalling all the birthdays we had celebrated together, each one filled with laughter, love, and shared dreams. This year, I wanted to make it extra special, something to remind him of the bond we cherished. I set the table with our best dishes, carefully arranging the silverware and folding the napkins into little triangles, just as he liked. "Perfect," I murmured, stepping back to admire my handiwork. The soft glow of candlelight flickered, adding a romantic touch that made my heart quicken with anticipation. Tonight would be a celebration of us, a reaffirmation of our love. As I stirred the simmering sauce on the stove, my thoughts drifted to Carlos. He was a good man, devoted and loving. But lately, I had sensed a distance growing between us, an unspoken tension that lingered like a shadow. I brushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the joy of the evening ahead. "He's going to love this," I whispered, imagining the look on his face when he walked through the door. Just as I was about to pour a glass of wine, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock. Carlos was still at work, and I wasn't expecting anyone else. Hesitantly, I opened the door to find Lucas and Raphael standing on the porch, both wearing mischievous grins. Surprised, they chimed in unison. "Guys, what are you doing here?" My heart raced, a mix of excitement and apprehension flooding through me. Carlos is still at work, and I was planning a surprise dinner for him. Lucas stepped forward, his charm radiating as he leaned against the doorframe. "We thought we'd help you celebrate. Besides, birthdays are meant for family, right?" I hesitated, glancing over my shoulder at the carefully set table. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Carlos, come on, Maria. We just want to have a little fun," Raphael interrupted, his youthful exuberance infectious. "We'll keep it low-key. Just a few laughs before the birthday boy arrives." Reluctantly, I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The warmth of the kitchen mingled with their playful energy. Lucas moved around the kitchen, examining the food with a playful grin. Smells amazing. You really outdid yourself, sis-in-law." He shot me a wink, and I felt my cheeks flush. "Thanks, Lucas," I replied, trying to brush off the fluttering feeling in my stomach. "But let's keep it down until Carlos gets here." As we waited, the conversation flowed easily. Lucas effortlessly drew me into a playful banter, his laughter filling the room. Raphael chimed in from time to time, his reckless charm adding to the atmosphere. But it was Lucas's gaze that kept drawing me in. He leaned closer, whispering jokes that made me laugh harder than I had in weeks. Finally, I heard the familiar sound of Carlos's car pulling into the driveway. I rushed to the door, excitement bubbling inside me. "He's here," I exclaimed, turning to the brothers. "Remember, act normal." Carlos stepped inside, his face lighting up as he caught sight of the decorations and the table set for a celebration. "Wow, Maria, this looks incredible," he beamed, wrapping his arms around me in a warm embrace. "Happy birthday, love," I said, my heart swelling with affection. Just then, Lucas and Raphael entered the living room, and I felt a slight tension in the air as Carlos's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Hey, Carlos. Happy birthday, man," Lucas exclaimed, clapping Carlos on the shoulder. "We thought we'd join the party." Carlos forced a smile, but I could see the discomfort flickering beneath the surface. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it," he said, his voice a bit strained. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere shifted. Lucas's flirtatious banter with me grew more daring, each comment laced with an underlying tension that made my heart race. Carlos shifted uncomfortably in his seat, stealing glances at Lucas that spoke volumes. I tried to brush it off, laughing along with the light-hearted jabs, but the air crackled with unspoken words. Just as I poured another glass of wine, Lucas leaned in closer, his voice low and teasing. You know, if Carlos doesn't appreciate you enough, you always have me to count on. His words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of heat across my face. Lucas, I scolded lightly, but there was a thrill in my chest that I couldn't ignore. Carlos cleared his throat, and the atmosphere grew thick with tension. I caught his eye, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt cloud his expression. The evening carried on, laughter ringing through the air, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. As Carlos blew out the candles on his cake, I made a wish, one that I hoped would keep the fragile peace of our lives intact, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond our doorstep. I sat at the small cafe, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. Lucas had suggested this meeting, and as I waited for him to arrive, I couldn't shake off the unease I felt. The soft hum of conversation around me faded into the background, and I was left alone with my thoughts, my heart pounding like a drum. When Lucas walked in, his presence lit up the room. He had an easy confidence that made it difficult for me to focus on anything else. "Hey, Maria," he said, his smile disarming. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting long." "No, not at all. I just got here," I replied, forcing a smile. Deep down, I was nervous. I couldn't forget the tension from Carlos's birthday dinner, the way Lucas had flirted with me, and how it had made my heart race. I shook my head to clear my thoughts as Lucas sat down across from me. We exchanged pleasantries, and soon we were lost in conversation. He spoke about family, about his dreams, and then, almost casually, he leaned in and said, "You know, I've always had feelings for you, right?" The words hit me like a slap. "What? Lucas, that's not true," I stammered, my cheeks flushing. "Come on, Maria. You can't tell me you've never felt the spark between us." He pressed, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to deny it, to push his words away, but there was a flicker of truth in his statement that I couldn't ignore. "You're my brother-in-law," I reminded him, my voice barely above a whisper. It's complicated." Lucas chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. "Complicated? Maybe, but I can't help how I feel. There's something about you, Maria. You're vibrant, intelligent, and so much more than just Carlos's wife." I felt my heart race, torn between the loyalty I owed to Carlos and the undeniable allure of Lucas's words. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice trembling. "Just think about it," he said, his tone softening. "I want you to be happy, and if you're not feeling that with Carlos." The weight of his implication hung thick in the air, and I felt a rush of guilt wash over me. "I'm happy, Lucas. I was until now." As we parted ways, the tension of the moment lingered in the back of my mind. I returned home with a heavy heart, my thoughts racing. I needed to confront Carlos about his brother's behavior, to set boundaries. Later that evening, as Carlos lounged on the couch, I took a deep breath and approached him. "Can we talk?" "Sure, about what?" he replied, glancing up from his phone. "It's about Lucas and Raphael," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I feel like they've been crossing lines lately. Lucas was flirting with me at your birthday dinner." Carlos shrugged, a dismissive expression on his face. "They're just having fun, Maria. Don't take it so seriously. You know how they are." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "But it's not just fun. It's inappropriate, and it makes me uncomfortable." "Come on, you're overreacting," he said, rolling his eyes. They're my brothers. They love to tease. It's just their way. His nonchalance cut deeper than I expected. What if it was the other way around? What if I was flirting with your sister? Carlos's expression shifted slightly, but he quickly brushed it off. You wouldn't do that. You love me, remember? The word stung, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Love? Did I even know what that meant anymore? I turned away, feeling more isolated than ever in my own home. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between the loyalty I felt for Carlos and the newfound thrill that Lucas had ignited within me. The prospect of forbidden attraction was intoxicating, yet the weight of my marriage bore down on me like a heavy shroud. Just as I began to drift off, a sudden knock on the door jolted me awake. I got up, heart racing, and opened it to find Raphael standing there, looking a bit sheepish. Hey, Maria. Sorry for dropping by unannounced. I need some help with a project for work. I hesitated, but there was something in his eyes that drew me in. Sure. Come in. As Raphael entered, the air felt charged with an electric tension. We settled at the kitchen table, a stack of papers between us, as I tried to focus on the task at hand. But as we talked, I couldn't ignore the way he looked at me, his gaze lingering a little too long. Thanks for helping me, he said, running a hand through his hair, a nervous energy radiating from him. I really appreciate it. No problem, I replied, feeling an inexplicable thrill at his attention. As we worked, our shoulders brushed, and I felt a heat rise in my cheeks. The chemistry between us was undeniable, and with every shared laugh and lingering glance, I felt my resolve weakening. I knew this was wrong, but part of me was exhilarated by the attention. Maria, can I be honest with you? Raphael asked suddenly, his voice low. I nodded, my breath catching in my throat. I think you're incredible. I've always thought that. His words sent a rush of warmth through me, and I felt a thrill run down my spine. Raphael. But before I could finish my thought, he leaned in closer, and I found myself caught between guilt and desire. I sat across from Sophia at our favorite cafe, the warm aroma of coffee swirling around us like a comforting embrace. The laughter and chatter of other patrons faded into the background as I leaned in closer to her, my heart racing at the weight of the confession I was about to make. Sophia, I don't know what to do, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucas and Raphael, they've been acting so differently towards me lately. It's like they're not just my brothers-in-law anymore. Sophia raised an eyebrow, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. What do you mean? Are they being inappropriate? I hesitated, recalling every flirtatious glance from Lucas and the way Raphael's presence made my skin tingle. It's complicated. Lucas, he's always been charming, but now it feels like he's crossing a line. And Raphael, I can't even explain it. When we're together, there's this chemistry. It's wrong, I know it is, but I can't help but feel drawn to them. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. You need to be careful, Maria. They're not just playing around. Men like that can be manipulative, especially when family is involved. You have to think about Carlos and your marriage. Her words hit me like a cold splash of water. I took a deep breath, trying to process the reality of my situation. I love Carlos. I do. But lately I've been feeling so alone. He brushes off my concerns about his brothers, and I feel like he doesn't see what's happening right in front of him. Sophia sighed, her eyes softening with sympathy. You deserve to be heard, Maria. Don't let them take advantage of your kindness. It's easy to get swept up in their attention, but you have to remember the consequences. I nodded, but her warning lingered in my mind like a shadow. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table, and I instinctively glanced at the screen. It was a message from Lucas. My heart raced as I opened it, reading his words. Can we talk? I really need to see you. What's wrong? Sophia asked, noticing my sudden change in demeanor. It's Lucas, I murmured, my stomach twisting into knots. He wants to talk. Now, she pressed, concern flooding her voice. I hesitated, torn between my better judgment and the inexplicable pull I felt towards him. I don't know. I shouldn't, but there's something about his message. It feels urgent. Maria, Sophia said firmly, think about what you're doing. You're walking a tightrope here. Don't let curiosity lead you into a trap. I swallowed hard, the weight of her advice pressing down on me. But the allure of Lucas was intoxicating, a siren's call that I couldn't ignore. I have to hear him out, I finally said, standing up and making my way to the exit. I'll be careful. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. What could Lucas want to discuss that couldn't be said in front of Carlos? My heart pounded in my chest as I parked the car and walked to the front door, the evening air thick with tension. Lucas was already there, leaning against the doorframe with a casual confidence that made my pulse quicken. Hey, he said, his voice low and inviting. Thanks for seeing me. Of course, I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. What's going on? He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne enveloping me. I know things have been weird between us, but I needed to talk about the family. I feel like there's so much pressure on you, and I want to help. I raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and skepticism brewing within me. Help? How? Let's be honest, Maria, he said, his gaze intense. You've been feeling distant from Carlos, right? It's tearing you apart, and I can see that. I don't want to be the villain here, but I can't help but think we have a special connection. I want you to be happy. His words settled over me like a warm blanket, and I felt my defenses crumbling. Lucas, I don't. Before I could finish, he closed the distance between us, his hands gently cupping my face. Just hear me out. I care about you, and I can't pretend anymore. We have something real. His lips brushed against mine, and for a moment, everything else faded away. I kissed him back, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions and the thrill of secrecy. But as I pulled away, reality crashed back in. What am I doing? I gasped, horror flooding my senses. This is wrong, Lucas. Is it? He asked softly, his eyes searching mine. Is it wrong to want something that feels so right? I shook my head, my heart racing as I fought against the turmoil within me. But deep down, I felt the undeniable pull of his words, the chaotic blend of desire and betrayal swirling around us. As I stood in the living room, the air thick with tension, Raphael's piercing gaze bore into mine. What happened between you and Lucas? He demanded, his voice low and intense. The weight of my actions crashed down on me, suffocating and relentless. My heart raced as I fumbled for words, the truth a jagged piece of glass lodged in my throat. It was a mistake. I finally stammered, my cheeks burning with shame. It meant nothing. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. The kiss we shared was electric, igniting something inside me that I had long buried beneath the surface. Raphael took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. A mistake? You kissed him, Maria. You let him into our world. I didn't mean to. He caught me off guard, I replied, my voice trembling. I felt like a cornered animal, desperate to escape the scrutiny of his intense gaze. Raphael's expression softened for a moment, confusion flickering across his features. Why would you do that? You have Carlos. You're supposed to be loyal to him. Loyalty. The word echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain. I had always been the devoted wife, the one who stood by Carlos through thick and thin, yet here I was, embroiled in a scandal that threatened to unravel everything. I know, I whispered, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. But Lucas, he made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Raphael's jaw tightened, and I could see the conflict within him. You're playing with fire, Maria. You need to choose. What do you really want? Before I could respond, the front door creaked open, and I heard Carlos's footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me. You can't tell him, I blurted out, desperation coloring my voice. Please, I need time to figure this out. Raphael's expression hardened again, and he nodded curtly. I won't say a word, but know this. If you keep this up, you're going to hurt everyone involved. With that, he turned on his heel and left, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. I took a shaky breath, my heart pounding as I wondered how I would face Carlos. But I didn't have to wait long. He entered the living room, a casual smile on his face that quickly faded when he noticed my tear-streaked cheeks. Maria, what's wrong? I swallowed hard, panic rising in my chest. Nothing, just, I was talking to Raphael. About what? His brow furrowed as he crossed his arms, his gaze piercing. I could feel the weight of his suspicion bearing down on me. You look upset. Really, it's nothing. Just family stuff, I said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. But Carlos wasn't convinced. He took a step closer, his expression shifting from concern to suspicion. You can tell me anything, Maria. I want to know what's going on in your head. I hesitated, the truth hovering just beyond my lips. It's complicated, I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm just confused. Carlos's eyes narrowed, his guard going up. Confused about what? Us, the brothers? About everything, I replied, feeling the walls closing in around me. I can't shake the feeling that something is off. He stared at me for a moment, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. Are you saying you don't trust me? No, it's not that. I began, but the words tangled in my throat. I had to tell him, had to confront him about my feelings and the brothers' advances, but fear gripped me. Would he even listen? Before I could gather the courage, Carlos interrupted my thoughts. If there's something you need to say, just say it. Don't hold back. His invitation hung in the air, tempting yet terrifying. Okay, I finally said, taking a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you about Lucas and Raphael. He stiffened, his eyes narrowing as he braced himself for what was to come. What about them? I hesitated, my heart racing. They've both crossed lines, Carlos. I'm not sure how to handle it. Cross lines? What do you mean? His voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying tension. Lucas kissed me, I blurted out, the confession spilling from my lips before I could take it back. Carlos's expression shifted, disbelief mingling with hurt. He did what? The silence that followed was suffocating, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. I opened my mouth to explain, to justify my feelings, but instead, I found myself lost in his gaze, searching for answers I wasn't sure I could provide. Maria, you can't be serious, he finally said, his voice low and strained. You know how much family means to me. How could you let this happen? I didn't mean for it to happen. I cried, feeling the tears spill down my cheeks. I was confused. I just needed someone to pay attention to me. He shook his head, disappointment etched across his face. And you chose my brother? Before I could respond, Carlos stepped back, his expression a mixture of anger and betrayal. I need to think, he said, his voice cold. As he turned to leave, I felt a sense of despair wash over me. I had opened Pandora's box, and now the chaos that followed seemed inevitable. I was caught in a storm of my own making, and I had no idea how to navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead. But one thing was clear. The truth had a way of unraveling everything. And I was standing at the precipice, teetering on the edge of a decision that could change everything. The revelation hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless and reeling. I could hardly believe what Carlos had just told me. A brief affair with a close friend? My mind raced back to all the moments I thought we were happy. All those years I had trusted him completely. Tears threatened to spill as I struggled to process the betrayal I felt, not just from him, but from the very foundation of our marriage. "Maria, I'm so sorry," Carlos pleaded, his voice thick with regret. "I never meant for you to find out like this. I thought it was behind me, a mistake I could bury." I couldn't look at him. "What do you want me to say, Carlos? That it's okay? That I'm supposed to forgive you just like that?" My voice trembled, filled with a mix of anger and hurt. He stepped closer, his hands reaching out, as if he could bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened between us. "I love you. I've always loved you. That mistake, it meant nothing. It was a moment of weakness." I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words suffocating me. "You expect me to believe that, after everything we've built together?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "How can I trust you now?" The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I felt my heart torn in two. On one side, the life I had always known, the love I had committed myself to. On the other, the seductive lure of Lucas and Raphael, who had both shown me a side of myself I had never acknowledged. I could still feel the warmth of Lucas's lips on mine, and that kiss had ignited something deep within me, a longing I had buried beneath years of loyalty. Fueled by anger and confusion, I felt an overwhelming urge to escape the reality of my marriage. I needed solace, a safe haven where I could forget the pain that Carlos had inflicted upon me. And at that moment, Lucas felt like the only answer. My heart raced as I thought about his arms around me, his laughter, the way he made me feel alive again. "Maria, please," Carlos's voice broke through my thoughts. "Don't do this. We can work through it together." But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to work through it anymore. My heart ached for the thrill I had felt with Lucas, the dangerous dance we were engaged in. The thought of seeking refuge with him sent a shiver of excitement down my spine. Later that night, I found myself at Lucas's apartment, the decision made before I even realized it. The moment he opened the door, that familiar spark ignited between us. His eyes searched mine, a mixture of concern and something more primal. "Maria, are you okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. I need to feel something different, something real." His gaze intensified, and before I could think twice, I was in his arms, surrendering to the moment. His lips met mine with an urgency that both thrilled and terrified me. I could feel the heat rising, the world outside fading away. It felt like freedom, but with every kiss, the weight of my choices pressed heavier on my conscience. But then Raphael burst into my thoughts, his reckless charm and the way he had made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. I pulled back from Lucas, breathless. "What am I doing?" "Maria, don't pull away now," Lucas urged, his hands still on my waist. "You deserve to feel wanted. You deserve to be happy." And then, just as I was about to lose myself in the moment again, Raphael's voice echoed in my mind. He had been the one to see the cracks in my marriage before I even recognized them. He had been the one to stir something inside me when we worked together, and I couldn't ignore that our connection had been undeniably electric. "Lucas, I can't just jump into this." I stumbled over my words, torn between the thrill of rebellion and the haunting reality of my marriage. "What if this ends up hurting me even more?" "Isn't it already hurting you?" he countered, an edge of frustration in his voice. "You're living a lie, Maria. You deserve to find what makes you feel alive again." The lines between love and betrayal blurred further with every passing moment. My heart was a battleground, and I was caught in the crossfire of my own desires. As I stood there, caught between Lucas's smoldering gaze and the wrestling thoughts of Raphael's unguarded affection, I knew one thing: whatever path I chose, my life would never be the same again. The air in the house felt thick with tension as I stood frozen in the living room, my heart racing. The confrontation had begun, and I could hear Carlos's voice rising, filled with anger and disbelief. I had never seen him like this before. The brothers were in the kitchen, their voices muffled but urgent. I could only imagine what was being said, but I felt the weight of the impending storm pressing down on me. "Lucas, I can't believe you'd betray me like this," Carlos shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "You think you can just waltz into my house and take advantage of my wife." "I'm not taking advantage of anyone, Carlos," Lucas replied, his tone sly, almost mocking. "Maria deserves to know the truth about your past." My breath caught in my throat. What could Lucas possibly mean? I stepped closer to the doorway, my pulse pounding in my ears. I needed to hear every word to understand the chaos unfolding around me. Truth? What truth? Carlos's voice was laced with contempt. "You think you can manipulate her with your pathetic games? You've always been jealous of what I have." "I'm jealous?" Lucas scoffed. "You've had it all, while I've been stuck in your shadow. But it's not just about what you have, Carlos. It's about what you've done. Maria deserves better than a man with your secrets." "Enough," I suddenly blurted out, stepping into the kitchen. My heart raced as all eyes turned to me. "What secrets? What are you talking about?" The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael shot a glance at Lucas, his expression unreadable. Carlos looked at me, his features tense and guarded. "Maria," Carlos began, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "Just tell me," I demanded, my voice rising in frustration. "What's going on?" Lucas took a step closer, his gaze piercing. "You don't even know, do you? All these years, Carlos has kept you in the dark about his past. The kind of past that could shatter the illusion of your perfect life together." "What do you mean?" I asked, bewildered. Before Carlos could respond, Raphael chimed in, his tone earnest. "Maria, Carlos had an affair years ago. It was with someone close to us, someone you trusted." I felt the world tilt beneath me. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. "Who?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Does it matter?" Carlos shot back, defensively. "I was young and stupid. It was a mistake, and I've moved on. This isn't about me." "Then what is it about?" I pressed, my emotions swirling dangerously. "Is this about your brothers trying to take advantage of me while you were busy hiding your own failures?" "Maria, listen to me," Carlos pleaded, his eyes softening for a moment. "I love you. I made mistakes, but I'm not the man I was back then. Is that supposed to make this any better?" I snapped, feeling the weight of betrayal clawing at my insides. As the heated argument continued, Lucas's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through his bravado. "I've loved you for years, Maria," he admitted, his voice low and sincere. "Since we were kids. It's not just a game for me. I never meant for things to go this far." "Loved me?" I echoed, my heart aching with confusion. "And you think that justifies everything?" Raphael stepped in, his tone a mix of desperation and sincerity. "I only went along with it because I wanted a chance with you too. I thought if I played the part, you'd notice me. But this is all wrong." My mind spun as I processed their words. I was caught in a tangled web of emotions, feeling both drawn to their honesty and repulsed by their betrayal. Just as I contemplated my next move, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I picked it up, glancing at the screen. An anonymous message flashed before me, a single line that sent chills down my spine. Carlos's past is darker than you think. Find out before it's too late. The weight of the world pressed down on my shoulders as I stood there, torn between the brothers who had captured my heart in different ways, and the husband whose past threatened to unravel everything. I was at a crossroads, faced with a choice that could shatter our lives forever.